I almost feel like I've been beating a dead horse with talking about who the SWAC is genuinely competing against when it comes to NIL. But now that Dr. McClellan has brought it up, I'm bringing my bat back out. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Now, as we wrap up today's episode, we'll take a look at BJ Jones's list of the top 10 most decisive or deciding. How should I say that? The top 10 games in the SWAC that will decide the conference the most. In segment 2, Quad Brown. He is the best case and worst case scenario at quarterback for Alabama A&M. But if he's able to stay healthy, I think that the best case scenario is the most likely scenario. But let's kick this whole thing off with me pulling out my Louisville Slugger, me pulling out that bat because I'm here to beat a dead horse again. Now, I don't know if you've heard me say this before. I don't know if you were able to hear Dr. Charles McClellan, the Southwestern Athletic Conference Commissioner, come out here and give a real good interview with Dr. Paul A. Bryant, the AD for Alabama A&M. But one of the things that stuck out to me, it's not even something that I think was a purposeful direction. I think it was just kind of an aside that Doc put out there, McClellan put out there. Both doctors gotta specify. And it was basically, he said, $10 million in the SEC equates to about $100,000 in the SWAC. And he was talking about recruiting and NIL in this conversation. But I had to rewind it because I did not understand it at first. I think maybe because the bigger number was first, I was like, but I understood it after a while. It's about what it takes or what kind of player you're getting, $10 million. If you're scaling it down, you're going to get that impact player for about 100,000. And I think he's just throwing out numbers. So nothing to be specific about, but it's the idea that you're not paying as much to get an impact player on this level as you are on the SEC. So we have to remember that when talking about the recruiting in the NIL. Now, I've been beating this horse for a while. I really have. I think that too often when we're talking about HBCU athletics, there is a comparison between, I'll just use Alabama A&M and Alabama because he was on Clock It with Dr. Paul Bryant. Alabama A&M and Alabama do not play by the same rules. They do not play with the same poker chips. They do not play with the same players, right? Like, we have to be honest about this. And I think a lot of people know this until it's time to start talking about how Alabama A&M needs to move. And no, this is not specific to the Bulldogs. I could have said this about North Carolina Central and Duke. I could have said this about North Carolina A&T and University of North Carolina. I could have said this about Texas Southern and PV versus UH and University of Texas. And I went with schools that aren't significantly, like UT is one of those schools, but UH is still a nice amount above TSU and PV. We have to understand who our competition really is. We have to understand that we are not competing with these other schools because at the end of the day, if Alabama wants your player, Alabama is going to get your player. Matter of fact, let's not even say this. It's not Alabama versus Alabama A&M. It's Alabama versus the will of that other guy. That's it. Because there's nothing that, I'm not trying to say that Alabama is the better institution. I'm not trying to say that. And quite frankly, which is the better institution really depends on who that individual is. But let's be honest, because this is what we do. We're honest on this show, right? What Alabama is offering your kid, Alabama A&M is not competing with it in those specific departments. Just think about it. Why? What is the appeal of going to this huge school? And I'll step away from Alabama so that if ever somebody clips it up, I don't know who's clipping my episodes. I think people are clipping my episodes to take it out of context. If that happens, that's how I know I really made it. But don't do it just because I said that's how I made it. But if ever somebody just clips it up and is like, see, this is what he said. And I'm like, bro, you didn't watch the whole product. That happens in the comments too. Some people be reacting like, you didn't watch the whole product. That's okay though. But let's say this P5. The appeal of going P5 simply is not something that the HBCU can compete with. Because the appeal is, oh, I'm going to have a better chance of getting drafted. You can say that we produce draft picks. Look at what we've done. You can say that they'll find you no matter where you are. But I think it's the trend of the NFL draft has shown you, and this doesn't have to just be NFL, but we're talking football right now. The trend of the NFL draft has shown you which type of schools that they prefer, which type of schools that they prioritize, right? You can say, hey, Alabama going to drop that bag. You don't have the Bama bag. You don't. What you have is the hope to say, I hope that my player says no. I hope that my player declines. But at the end of the day, you are not competing with Alabama. You are not competing with LSU. You are not competing with Ohio State. You're not competing with Southern Cal. You're not. You're hoping that your player does not pick that person. You're hoping that your player says, I'd rather stay with the school that gave me a shot. But at the end of the day, the competition is non-existent on that level. You're competing with Mississippi Valley State. You're competing with FAMU, with Jackson State, with Texas Southern, with Prairie View, with Alcorn, with Southern, with North Carolina Central, right? You're comparing with North Carolina A&T, Tennessee State, right? These are the Maryland Eastern Shore. If we're going to talk about basketball, let me show some love to our other sports as well. At the end of the day, something needs to stop. I'm just being real. At the end of the day, we need to stop with the comparisons between HBCUs and P5s. I've said this before. I'll say it again. It's not comparable. And when we're talking about the NIL, if they want your player and the money is the thing that's pulling them and magnetizing them to this bigger school, your player's gone. No amount of NIL deals is going to change that. But what you can do is you can take your $100,000 that doesn't get a sneeze in the SEC, but you can take that and get a top flight quarterback when you compare him to Jackson State. Right? Jacoby Morgan's going to be out of there in a little bit. What are they going to do with quarterback after? Are they going to try to go get another transfer guy? Are they going to try to go with somebody who's already in the system? If they're going to try to continue this success, because I think a lot of times people try to go get proven commodities when they're already a proven commodity as a unit, right? The team is a proven commodity, so they try to go get a proven commodity at quarterback. They may say, look, we about to blow a bag on the best quarterback in the transfer portal that we can have. Well, if they can give 100, maybe you can give 120. Like, these are the type of things that they're saying. And the quote that I want to give, not directly all the way, but basically, he said, Dr. McClellan said that what a quarterback will get in the SWAC will be determined by the market, and we want to be the market. I think that is exactly what he said, but I'm allowing some room for paraphrasing. At the end of the day, that's what the goal should be. The goal should be, I'm going to be the market. I'm going to be the top buyers. And I think that you're competing with your own conference. I think you're competing with the MEAC. I think you're competing with other FCS schools. I don't know what the revenue looks like, but this whole conversation started from SWAC TV, and then also the ability or opting into the house settlement to have the ability to pay players, because he said, look, everybody can't pay, but everybody should have the option to pay, which I thought was good. It's not necessarily I opt in, now we're paying players. It's I opt in, now SWAC TV's around, we're going to generate some revenue. They have some other internal plans to lead to where all SWAC coaches, or excuse me, all SWAC teams can pay players to come in. And that doesn't mean that they'll pay at the same rate, because certain schools are better off than others. And that's just how it's going to be. But I thought that Dr. McClellan coming in and saying that 10 million in the SEC is like 100,000 in the SWAC, and we wanted to be the market. I think that was it. It was everything for me, right? When I hear people who are high ranking, when I hear people who have power, who are decision makers, who have a position, and they come and they echo sentiments that I've already had, I always feel a tad bit more, I don't want to say vindicated, but validated is probably a better way to say it. Because I never feel like people are against me. It's funny. I was talking to the missus, as always, right? I always throw out these little stories. I was talking to missus, but we be talking about stuff. And we were talking about opinions on music or something. And how do we feel like when our opinion ends up being a very popular opinion once we see what other people are talking about? And that's kind of like what I feel here. I'm not going to give you all the details of that conversation, but the premise was basically, is there a similar, or my response was, there's a little bit of a pride when I've been saying something for a while, and then I end up seeing that there's a mass group of people who agree. This is a similar level of pride, but I'd say it's even heightened because it's not just a mass group of people agreeing on a small opinion. It's somebody who is in a position of power, like Dr. McClellan is, saying, this is the scale. We have to scale things. We have to take that 10 million over here. That's like 100,000 over here. We have to be real about it. And to me, that's all about knowing what ballpark that you're playing in. I've never heard the Little League World Series champions saying we can go play the Astros, because you understand what ballpark that you're playing in, right? I've never heard, I actually hate that example, but I don't believe in cutting things because it was a good example. But it was a good analogy, I should say. But I didn't like putting HBCUs in the Little League World Series. But the point is, the FCS champions, right? You're not going to sit here and say, oh, the FCS champions should go play the national champions on the FBS level. No, we just understand these are two different conversations. One's the FCS champion, one is the FBS champion. They're both collegiate athletics, but they're not in the same conversation. And that's how I feel when it comes to monetary conversations around P5 schools and HBCUs. And I know for some people, it's like, bro, this is a no-brainer. What are you even talking about? You'd be surprised how many people always say, well, Alabama's doing this. Well, Oklahoma State's doing this. I don't care. We don't play by the same rules. We ain't playing with the same bag, and we're not playing at the same tables. We may be playing the same sport, but there's too many things that are different for them to be the comparison for what we should do, how we should operate, and what kind of players we should bring in, or how money is being handled. They don't have the same financial restrictions. They don't have the same history. I'm done with it. I'm leaving it alone, and I'm moving on to Quad Brown. Now I'm actually getting to Alabama A&M specifically. And Quad Brown is the best case and the worst case scenario for the Bulldogs. But I think that the best case scenario is the most likely. He just has to stay healthy. Let's explore that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is the number one place for all of my sports wagers. I don't care if we talking about football, because it's back Thursday. Oh my gosh. Oh, we got football. We got football again. And this time we have multiple teams that are playing. So I'm pretty excited about that. You got football preseason. I don't care if it's the summer sports like baseball or tennis is coming up. Shout out to the person who responded in the comments and told me who won the last 3 or so bowling championships. If you want to put some money down on bowling, it's all there. FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Simple and plain. If you want to wager on the upcoming football season, you want to wager on some WNBA, what about the tennis and MLB? So go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com. Get $150 back in bonus bets. All you have to do is win your first $5 bet. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL. Like I said, multiple big-time games. Preseason is here. So, also, I shout out the person who said something about bowling. I've noticed a lot of people have stepped to Cam's defense. A lot of people stepped to Cam's defense, and that's kind of more surprising than I thought it. It's surprising. It's been more people than I thought it would be. So, That was just interesting to me. Anyway, Quad Brown feels like the answer to Alabama A&M's problems is just one thing he must avoid, and that's injury. At the end of the day, he's not banking on this. At the end of the day, this is a difficult thing to even have the conversation about. But on Who Dat Dish, one of the first initiatives that I pushed, it was beginning of July, I believe, mid-July, around that time frame. And one of the first initiatives that I pushed was a best case, worst case, and then also X factor at every single position. We did it for quarterback, running back, the whole nine. When it comes to the quarterback position at Alabama A&M, Quad Brown is the starter. Coach Shea said that if it started today, he'd be the starter. And I think that that's a big difference from where you were. Where like, hey, we're in a battle, da-da-da-da. When you say somebody's the starter if the season started today, you don't want to just flat out say it's his job, but that says a lot. There's a lot of nonverbal communication in that statement. But when you're the starting quarterback, you are responsible for the best case and the worst case. And I think they're both pretty black and white. And none of them have to do with 27 touchdowns or 8 on the ground or anything like that. It's simple. The worst case scenario and the best case scenario both revolve around Quad Brown's health. The best case and worst case scenario for Alabama A&M at quarterback all have to do with Quad Brown's health, because Brown has dealt with injuries in the past. And to me, having to deal with injuries yet again is the worst case scenario. But if he's able to stay healthy and avoid that worst case, then I think the best case is the most likely case. And that is that Alabama A&M finally has stability at quarterback. I'm talking about going back to the Glass days. That's the last time. We're approaching half a decade. Hear me again. We are approaching half a decade since Alabama A&M has went through a singular season with a singular quarterback. That is absolutely unacceptable. That is a reflection of instability that you cannot win that way. Period. You cannot win that way. And that's not lost on Quad Brown. That's not lost on him at all, because he says no more quarterback carousel. I want us to be stable, consistent, and winning. I like this guy. I don't know if you can say that if Maynard's still around, because he's the one doing the whole hot potato. But since Glass left the Bulldogs, it's just been quarterback. 4 years, going on 5. Since you've seen that. Or going on 4, rather. 22, 23, 24. So going on 4 years. But you're approaching half a decade, nevertheless. You just need Quad Brown to stay healthy because he's talented. He just has to avoid the injuries that have plagued him in the past. But if he's able to stay on this field, I think Alabama A&M got him a quarterback, y'all. About time. We was hoping that it'd be either him or Mekhi Hagans. And because Hagans is gone, that makes an injury the worst case scenario. If I was an Alabama A&M fan, I'd be tired of always tossing quarterbacks around. I'd be tired of that. But because Mekhi Hagans, or if Mekhi Hagans was there, I'd be a little bit better off, because I'd feel like Quad Brown, Mekhi Hagans, either one I feel confident with. But no Mekhi Hagans, there is no more one guy goes down with injury in this case, and now we feel good. There is no more of that. It's no more of that. It's all on Quad Brown. And I don't know if I knew or if I just forgot that Quad Brown been in college for 7 years. You ever seen that Kevin Hart meme when Don Cheadle finally tells him his age? It's a little profane. I don't even say any sort of thing that can be taken as profanity on the show. But if y'all know what I'm talking about, that was a hilarious meme. And that's also how I felt. I just felt like, dang, 7 years. Dude, a vet for real. And he said, every program has taught me something unique about football, about leadership, about myself. That variety has built a resilience in football IQ that you can't get any other way. I'm ready to take all that experience and build something real here at Alabama A&M. And I thought that was interesting because he talked about the football IQ. And this is the last chance for him. He's had success elsewhere. One thing he said is, I know what that success feels like, and I also know what I'm capable of. And he has seen it. He saw it at Georgia State. The offense that Quad Brown led his freshman year, redshirt freshman year at Quad State. Might as well have been, because the way that he was taking over that offense, the heights that he was leading them to, it's not just I played well. He was balling. I'm talking about 24 touchdowns, 7 on the ground. That was a record by a GSU freshman. I'm talking about Sun Belt Player of the Week, MVP in the bowl game. You're looking at Quad Brown as a player who had multiple 3+ touchdown games. Somebody who led Georgia State to the most points per game in school history. 3rd most total yards in school history. I think 2nd most rushing yards in school history. And he was a part of that rushing attack as their 3rd leading rusher. So when you're really talking about Quad Brown, what he brings to Alabama A&M should not just be left at he's been there for 3 years. He's comfortable. He's a 7-year player who's coming in with a load of experience, not just on the field, also off the field. You get to see a lot. So I expect that the leadership will be high. I expect that he'll be able to step on the field and command the huddle immediately, because he's not new to this. He's been doing this for years upon years upon years. This will be a very fascinating, I don't want to say pickup, but him starting all of the season really does feel like an addition. If there's one thing I had wished that Alabama be done with, that would be playing hot potato at the quarterback position. And let me tell you once again what it is that Quad Brown is setting out to do. He says, no more quarterback carousel. I want us to be stable, consistent, and winning. And when he says us, those first 2 things start with him. He has to be stable. He has to be consistent. I believe that he has the talent to do it. And I believe he now has a coach that's going to give him the room to make mistakes, but still remain stable and consistent. Too often, I think that Maynard took any kind of mistake to be, oh, he's not consistent anymore. He's not stable. You have to give people time to make bad games or have bad games, make bad plays, have mistakes. Those things are required because you're not going to get perfection. And sometimes it feels like Akil Glass is what they were looking for. You're not going to get another Akil Glass. But if you let Quad Brown be somebody else, or let Quad Brown be himself, then I think he'll really flourish and show that he can just be a talented player. But as we push forward and wrap up today's episode, what are the pivotal games in the SWAC? BJ Jones has the answer to this in what was a great tweet. And I want to recap that as we continue and close out today's episode of Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. BJ Jones dropped the 10 matchups that will decide the SWAC. He goes JSU versus FAMU, Bama State versus Jackson State, PV versus Southern, Grambling versus Alcorn, PV versus Alcorn, Bama State versus FAMU, Alabama A&M versus JSU, Southern versus Alcorn, Grambling versus Jackson State, and Jackson State versus Southern. Now, of course, you're going to see a whole lot of Jackson State on this list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these games. So 5 of the 10 matchups are Jackson State games. They're the big dog. At the end of the day, that's what you should expect. So that's not crazy to me. But what popped out to me and what I noticed is Jackson State versus FAMU still at 1. Jackson State versus Bama State at 2. To me, this is and has been the top 3 in the SWAC East for a while. And if either one of these teams can take down Jackson State, it's going to not only come into play later in the season, depending on what everything looks like at that moment, it's going to set a tone. And that's how I kind of look at some of these games. I know he's not saying this for any of them. He's talking about deciding. But to me, a game like PV versus Alcorn, that's going to be a tone setter. A game like Grambling versus Jackson State, I think is going to be a tone setter. That's a perfect example where one's in the West, one's in the East. But one game I would have liked to see on here was probably Southern versus Grambling. I would have liked to see Southern versus Grambling on this list. Just in the sense that if Grambling versus Alcorn is on here, that maybe this will be here again. And I also might have liked to see Southern versus FAMU. That probably would have been my East versus West matchup, to be honest, is Southern versus FAMU. But this is a really solid list. I liked it a lot. Bama State versus Jackson State is always a tight one. It's always a fun one. FAMU is looking for a bounce back. FAMU is looking to bring all of that talent in the portal and say we finally have the team that Cozy is looking for. And I think that you can't downplay it. They always get talented guys in the portal. They always get talented guys coming onto their team. So Jackson State versus FAMU does feel like a matchup that's going to decide so much. It has for years. Why would I discount it now? It didn't last year, and it didn't the year before that. But they were both going in there with, or one of them in each of those games was going in with a first-year head coach. PV versus Southern is it's interesting to me. PV versus Southern and PV versus Alcorn are probably the SWAC games. PV, that trio. PV versus Alcorn, Alcorn versus Southern, Southern versus PV. That right there is the game I'm looking forward to. And I thought it was noted. It was noted. PV versus Southern was higher on the list than Southern versus Alcorn. It was also higher on the list than PV versus Alcorn. But to me, I don't know if you walk out of there unscathed again. I just don't know if Southern walks through that division without a loss again. I think that PV is going to be a much better team. I think that Alcorn is going to come in and be a much better team. I think that you could see it could come down to, instead of who doesn't lose one, who doesn't lose two. That's how the SWAC West is breaking out to me. At the end of the day, or at the end of the year, we may not be looking to see who ran through the SWAC West. It's more like who survived the SWAC West. I think that Southern could lose to PV, could lose to Alcorn, but you can't lose both. And the same goes for any of those teams. You can't lose both, especially if you start stepping out, right? So Alcorn is going to play Jackson State. That's going to be a tough one. Southern is going to play FAMU. That's going to be a tough one. I don't know PV's schedule right now. I feel like PV plays FAMU again. I don't know. Let me see. Actually, I don't feel like looking this up right now. I'm trying to do it on split screen. It's not working for me. Oh, here we go. Schedule 2025. They play Bama State. Oh, they don't play FAMU. Not in here, at least. I don't see FAMU on the schedule. So it's gonna be a tough one. It's gonna be a tough one, guys. It's gonna be a tough one, but it'll be an interesting time to watch. I'll just say that. But that trio in the SWAC West, that competition, I think everyone's going to lose at least one game. But who can keep themselves from losing two? Especially if both of those games come in the SWAC West. Last year, Southern was able to beat everybody in the division, but lose to FAMU. I don't know if it happens like that again. It'll be a tight battle. I think both of those other squads, the purple squads, have gotten much better. But on tomorrow's episode, let's talk about them big dogs again. Jackson State. It's lonely at the top, and they wouldn't know because they're the only HBCU in the preseason FCS top 25. Let's talk about that on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.